This is a satellite foundational course for GOES-R on multi-channel interpretation approaches for use with the ABI. It includes information on band differences, why they work, and what information they show, which band differences are in AWIPS, and on RGBs, red, green, blue composites, including the baseline RGB products in AWIPS. The topics of this training are related. There are different ways of looking at channel differences from the GOES-R Advanced Baseline Imager, or ABI. You can look at difference fields, that would be brightness temperature difference for infrared or reflectance difference for visible or near infrared. You can toggle between fields, and you can look at RGBs, or red, green, blue images. RGBs are created by assigning an individual band or a band difference to the three color components, red, green, and blue, that are used to create an image. All of the ways of looking at channel differences highlight the sensitivities of the individual channels. This chart lists the bands that are available on the GOES-R Advanced Baseline Imager, or ABI. The chart shows 16 bands, the central wavelength, the wavelength range, the resolution, and the band nickname. The nickname gives you an idea of what the band can be used for, but there are lots of other possibilities that extend beyond the nickname. Band placement is typically related to absorption by a particular gas, be it water vapor, sulfur dioxide, ozone, or carbon dioxide, or bands are placed in a region where there is little absorption by atmospheric gases. There are satellite foundation course trainings on the individual bands. Check them out. When you're looking at band differences, or at RGBs, or even just comparing one band to another, it's important that you understand the physics of the band in question. Why is that particular band included on ABI? There are training modules on individual bands to which you can refer. When band differences are considered, what differences between the bands exist and why? Some of those are listed on this slide and will be considered more in depth in this training. Some brightness temperature difference fields are very well known. These are listed below. That they are well known in part underscores why the channels are included on ABI. This chart that you may have seen before shows the infrared channels on ABI. The blue regions show where individual bands are detecting energy. Some are narrow, band 10, and some are relatively wide, band 8. The red line can be interpreted two ways, either the relative amount of absorption by any gas in the atmosphere, or the brightness temperature sensed by the satellite in clear skies. Cooler brightness temperatures result when absorption by a gas occurs in the atmosphere. Strong absorption by water vapor is apparent in bands 8, 9, and 10. Ozone absorption is apparent in band 12, and CO2 absorption is occurring in band 16. These bands will all give cooler brightness temperatures in clear skies because of that absorption. When the red line is near zero, at the bottom of the chart, little absorption is occurring. This is the case for the 10.3 micron band 13. Many of the heritage difference products use 10.7 microns on GOES 13, 14, and 15. How does that particular channel compare to the closest channels on ABI, channels 13 at 10.3 microns and 14 at 11.2? The 10.3 micron channel is cleaner, that is, there is less water vapor absorption, and it's also narrower than the 10.7 micron channel on GOES 13, 14, and 15. The 11.2 micron channel is also narrower than the 10.7 micron channel, but it has similar amounts of water vapor absorption. If you want to highlight water vapor differences between channels with a split window difference that includes 12.3 microns, maybe 10.3 microns is the channel to use, but 11.2 microns will give similar results. The color-shaded field here depicts the difference between the brightness temperatures at 11.2 and 12.3 microns, the split window difference, from Himawari 8. The contours are dew point temperature at 925 millibars from the GFS, showing a dry region over the central Pacific Ocean. The split window difference has a very strong signal in that same dry region. The values neatly correspond to the dry air. A corresponding 3.9 micron image is inset. It's nighttime over this scene, and arrows highlight similar features. The split window difference dryness is apparent in the 3.9 micron image as well. There are no clouds. The split window difference also detects dust. When energy radiates upward from the surface through a dust layer, the amount of absorption and subsequent re-emission varies with wavelength. In particular, dust is a good absorber of 11 micron radiation, but a not-so-good absorber of 12 micron radiation. 11 micron energy leaves the warm surface and is absorbed by dust higher in the atmosphere, and then re-emitted from that higher level where the temperature is cooler. 12 micron energy leaves the warm surface and passes through the dust without being absorbed as much, so there is less re-emission from colder, higher levels. Thus, the 11 micron brightness temperature will be cooler than the brightness temperature at 12 microns. It's common for dust RGBs to include the 11-12 split window difference as one of the colors. Now, it is true that water vapor in the atmosphere will more readily absorb the 12 micron energy. This is the reason that the split window difference can detect moisture distributions. But this is a dust storm. It's occurring in a region without a lot of water vapor present. The dust absorptive differences for the 11 and 12 micron channels are mirrored in the ice absorptive differences in the 11 and 8.6 micron channels. Again, why does greater absorption lead to cooler brightness temperatures? More of the 11 micron energy upwelling through the ice cloud will be absorbed and then re-emitted from the colder temperature. Proportionally, not as much energy to 8.6 microns is absorbed. If there is an absorption, or there is less absorption, the emitting surface is farther down, closer to the surface, in the warmer atmosphere. Here's an ice cloud. This is an 11 micron view from Aquamotus over Hurricane Emily in the Northeast Caribbean Sea in 2015. If we compare the 11 micron scene to the 8.5 micron scene, recall that they're both window channels, what would you expect? Here's a scatter plot of 11 versus 8.5 micron brightness temperatures from the cirrus canopy. If you're above the line, 8.5 micron brightness temperatures are warmer than 11 micron. If you're below the line, 8.5 is colder. There's a big region where the 8.5 micron window channel is much warmer than the 11 micron window channel. This shows the brightness temperature difference as a function of 11 micron brightness temperature difference. There's a sweet spot where the temperature difference peaks, almost 12 degrees Celsius warmer in the 8.5 micron window channel. Note that two regions are boxed, a blue region and a green region. In the next slide, we'll consider where these regions occur. The blue region had a small difference. This is very thick ice, that is, clouds are optically thick. The small difference occurs because the ice absorbs energy at 11 microns more readily than it does at 8.5 microns. The emitting surface is higher up for 11 microns and therefore colder. The green region shows a bigger difference because it's a region of thinner clouds. The 11 micron sensor is more sensitive to colder parts of the pixel, and the 8.5 microns is comparatively more sensitive to warmer parts of the pixel. This subpixel effect leads to the difference in brightness temperatures for thin clouds, and it's noticeable at many wavelengths. To summarize, the blue pixels are probably deep tropical convection, optically thick clouds where the strongest thunderstorms are associated with the cyclone. In the green region, the convection isn't quite so active, so this brightness temperature difference is telling you something about the weather that is occurring. The subpixel effect doesn't have a big effect in clear fields of view, or in completely cloudy fields of view, but it does have a big impact on partially clear fields of view. When a cloud is not opaque, completely filling a pixel, parts of the pixel will be filled with colder regions and parts will be filled with warmer regions. Shorter wavelength detectors are more sensitive to these warm regions, and longer wavelength detectors are more sensitive to colder regions. And this subpixel effect leads to differences in computed brightness temperatures in the ABI bands that are independent of gas absorption. Several plots on this page document subpixel effects. 4 window channels are shown on the upper left, and you can see that detected temperatures cool for this thin cirrus as the wavelength of the observation increases. Longer wavelength detectors are more sensitive than shorter wavelength detectors to the colder parts of a pixel. That's the subpixel effect. The figure in the bottom left shows a shaded region from which points are extracted for the figures on the right. The bar graph shows the number of pixels showing a given temperature, colder to the left, warmer to the right. Note how shorter wavelengths show more points that are relatively warmer, and longer wavelengths show more points that are colder, as expected for the subpixel effect. The bottom right figure shows a density diagram of band 11, that's 8.6 microns on Himawari, versus bands 13, 14, and 15. The dashed line shows x equals y, and you can see that the temperatures observed at shorter wavelengths are typically warmer than those observed at longer wavelengths. Another well-known difference field is used to identify regions of low stratus and fog, that is, water-based clouds. These clouds are not black-body emitters of all wavelength radiation. Satellite detectors of radiation simply collect a number of photons. The conversion of these radiance counts to brightness temperature assumes black-body emission, however, so if a surface hasn't emitted as a black body, meaning less photons than a theoretical maximum have been emitted, then the inferred temperature will be cooler. This occurs for 3.9 micron radiation, but not for radiation around 11 microns. For water-based clouds, the 3.9 micron brightness temperature is therefore cooler than the 10.3 or 11.2 micron brightness temperature on ABI, or the 10.7 micron brightness temperature on GOES 13, 14, and 15. In this cross-section from a fog bank to a cirrus deck, you see differences in the brightness temperatures that are related to emissivity differences in the cloud, so that the 3.9 micron temperature is cooler than the 10.7, and you see subpixel effect differences in cirrus, so that 3.9 micron temperatures are warmer than 10.7 micron brightness temperatures. In clear regions at night, the 10.7 and 3.9 temperatures are similar. It's not only clouds that can affect the 3.9 micron brightness temperatures. They are derived from emitted radiation and can show significant variability due to differences in surface emissivity. This graph shows emissivity over water, where it's pretty close to 1, dry sand, red clay, and tree leaf. Dry sand and red clay have emissivities much less than 1. Black body temperatures over that surface, then, will be cooler than black body temperatures computed at other wavelengths where emissivities are close to 1, like 11 microns. This has to be considered when you're looking at the radiative brightness temperature. Reflectance differences are what's important for visible and near-infrared channels, as shown on this chart showing the 2 visible and 4 near-infrared channels on ABI. Note, for example, how much more reflective grass is in the 0.86 band 3, the veggie band, than in the 0.64 micron visible band 2. Note how much more reflective snow and ice are in the visible than in the 1.6 micron channel. These differences can be played off one another to highlight features in either difference fields, or in RGBs, or in simple comparisons, visual inspection of the 2 bands. In band 3, the veggie band on ABI, the 0.86 microns, green vegetation is far more reflective than in the visible channel. Thus, this band excels in distinguishing between land and water. Bodies of water surrounded by land will really pop out, so it's great for examining changes due to excessive rainfall, for example flooding. Because green land is so reflective, clouds are sometimes hard to distinguish over land in the 0.86 micron. There's actually more contrast in the visible in the 0.64 microns. Snow and ice clouds are highly reflective in the visible 0.64 micron visible band on ABI. Snow absorbs energy at 1.6 microns. So snow and ice will look much different than water-based clouds in the 1.6 micron imagery. This figure of a wave cyclone in the western Pacific shows a cirrus shield that is much less bright than the lower water clouds to its north and west. That's because ice is absorbing a lot of energy and reflecting not as much compared to water-based clouds. If reflectance is in play, that is its visible imagery, different visible and near-infrared channels can be used in channel difference fields or RGBs to highlight features such as ice clouds, land-water boundaries, flooding, etc. Almost every RGB using visible imagery that highlights ice includes the 1.6 micron channel. Let's now consider RGBs. To interpret RGBs, you must understand how colors are constructed in modern computer imagery. In the color cube shown, the primary colors, red, green, and blue, are at 3 corners of the cube. White, which is all colors, and black, no colors, are at 2 other corners. And the remaining 3 corners are color combinations. Yellow, which is red plus green with no blue. Cyan, which is green plus blue with no red. And magenta, which is red plus blue with no green. All colors can be found in the color cube based on the 3 color combination. For example, orange is a lot of red plus some green and no blue. Knowing how different colors are created will help your interpretation of RGB imagery. This slide shows how changing one of the three inputs will affect the RGB image. The columns show the red, green, and blue components and the derived RGB. The top line shows the red, green, and blue bands from Terra Modis and the true color RGB that's derived from them. The control, if you will. In the second line, the red component is only half as bright, but the green and the blue remain at full intensity. In the third line, the green component is half as bright, and the red and the blue are full intensity. And in the fourth line, the blue component is half as bright, and the red and the green are at full intensity. The RGBs from the four combinations are in the rightmost column. With less red, the RGB acquires a cyanish hue, because blue plus green is cyan. With less green, the RGB acquires a purple hue, because with less green you see more red and blue, which makes magenta. And with less blue, the RGB acquires a yellowish hue, because with less blue you have red and green that makes yellow. In this example, my opinion is that the RGB with halved green is the most unnatural looking, perhaps indicating the importance of green wavelengths over a vegetated surface in a true color RGB. There are some well-known RGBs that have some history, mostly associated with the Severi imager on the Meteosat second generation, or MSG satellite, which satellite has higher spectral resolution than present goes, but less spectral resolution than AHI or ABI. Polar orbiters such as SUMI NPP, Terra, Aqua, and MEDOP also produce data with sufficient spectral resolution to produce useful RGBs. This list from the Comet lesson on RGBs, also available at the GOES-R website, with a link at the end of this lesson, outlines common RGBs by name. You can also find additional information on RGBs at this link to EUMETSAT. You can create single-banded combinations of RGBs using an online tool at the URL on this screen. Click on it. This web app uses current AHI data and allows you to choose single bands for the red, green, and blue components, and it creates the RGB combination. In this way, you can explore the different possibilities combining single AHI channels. Here's an example that combines visible, near-infrared, and infrared into one RGB. Because this RGB spans the terminator, only the infrared channel will provide information in regions where it's dark, and in outer space where both visible and near-infrared are black. There are bright white regions in the infrared that are cold clouds, gray regions, mid-level and low clouds, and dark regions, open ocean, that should have varying amounts of green in the RGB product. What color should open ocean be? What about high clouds and low clouds? Were your guesses correct? Open ocean is green. There is a green component from the infrared, and the red and the blue components were dark. Purple clouds have both red components and blue components. The red is the visible, the blue is the 1.61, and there's plenty of reflectance for low water-based clouds. But there's not a lot of green for those clouds because they are warm, and warm regions are dark in the infrared, and therefore there's little green component to them. Red plus blue makes purple. Yellow clouds have red and green. They're highly reflective in the visible, the red component, and they're very cold and therefore bright white in the 10.3, which is the green component. But there's not much blue in them because they are ice clouds and they're poorly reflective, so they're yellow. Outer space here is green, and places with no sunlight are various shades of green. There are 7 RGB images that you'll see next. Note that the bands used here are listed in RGB order, and they're fairly similar. There are only 5 bands in these 7 different RGBs, so you can or should be able to guess why each one is used. For example, the 0.86 micron or veggie band is used because it accentuates land-sea contrasts, and all clouds are highly reflective. 1.6 microns, or the ice channel, is used to differentiate between, for example, clouds composed of water droplets and ice crystals. 0.64 microns highlights what visible data show. 3.9 micron and 10.3 micron give temperatures. All of these are used to provide different color information in the RGB. If reflective channels are used, the product is useful only during the day. In this first RGB example, both red and green inputs are from the 0.64 micron visible channel. Red and green make yellow, so low clouds here are yellow because warm features, like low clouds, means there's not much blue in the RGB. High clouds are white. There is a lot of reflectance from the visible, the red and green channels, and the 10.3 is also bright. Large amounts of red, green, and blue make white. This cloud convection RGB, don't confuse it with the EUMETSAT RGB, also named cloud convection, is very similar to the previous slide, but the 0.64 visible has been replaced by the 0.86 micron veggie band. So if you toggle between this slide and the previous one, you'll see better land-sea discrimination. Also, the land in this RGB is greener because land is more reflective at 0.86 microns than at 0.64 microns. This RGB includes the ice channel in green. Ice clouds and snow are not reflective at 1.6 microns, so there is little green contribution to the RGB where ice clouds are present, so they'll have a more magenta look. Red plus blue is magenta. Low, water-based clouds are highly reflective at 0.64 and at 1.6, the red and green channels, but dark in the 10.3 micron, the blue channel, so they will be yellow or orange. Bare ground shows up as green because land is reflective in the 1.6 microns. Very cold land will be cyan, which is green plus blue, but snow-covered land will be magenta, highly reflective in the visible, very bright in the 10.3 microns, but dark in the 1.6 microns. The 0.86 veggie band nicely discriminates between land and sea, and clouds are a bright white. 3.9 microns is used in this RGB because it includes information during the day about solar reflectance that is a function of particle size and cloud composition. A cloud made up of small droplets and one made up of large droplets will have similar 10.3 micron brightness temperatures, but the 3.9 micron brightness temperature will differ because of varying amounts of reflected solar radiation at 3.9 microns controlled by particle size. If you're trying to distinguish between snow, made up of ice, and fog, clouds made up of water droplets in an RGB, as in this one, you do have to use the ice channel. The 1.6 microns is done here. Ice clouds are dark in this image in the 1.6 microns, and that influences the RGB. If there's snow on the ground, that will show up as a different color because of its temperature detected by the 3.9 micron channel. This is a fairly well-known RGB. Click on EUMETSAT for more information. The veggie band is used as the green channel, Viz is used as blue, so land has a greenish tint because land is reflective in the 0.86 micron. 1.6 is used to highlight ice features. Clouds are either white or cyan, green plus blue, depending on whether or not they include ice. This RGB plays off emissivity differences at night in water clouds for 10.3 microns, at which wavelength the radiation is emitted as nearly a black body, and at 3.9 microns, at which wavelength radiation is not emitted as a black body. The 3.9 micron brightness temperature will be cooler with water-based clouds, and therefore brighter than at 10.3 microns, so water-based clouds will take on a green plus red equals yellow tint. Sometimes, as in this example, the yellow is pretty subtle. AWIPS version 16.2.2 introduced a gamma control to manipulate the looks of RGBs. Gamma controls where the most contrast exists in the RGB. For smaller values, the darker part of the image shows more contrast, and for larger values, the brighter part of the image shows more contrast. To access the control, right-click on the annotation label in the RGB image, and then click on Composite Options. The min-max values for each output can be adjusted, and gamma can be adjusted as well. Here we have three GOES-R simulated images. The ice channel, 1.61 microns in the red channel, the veggie band, 0.86 microns in the green, and the visible 0.64 microns in the red. The four RGB combinations show different values of gamma used, and how they can highlight different parts of the RGB. This website allows you to explore online, after this training, different band combinations to create RGBs. See what you can do. Finally, there are band differences pre-computed available in AWIPS. When you look at this list, you should see familiar combinations. Cloud phase plays off ice absorption differences, for example. Fog plays off emissivity differences. The split window difference is useful for both moisture and dust detection. Snow detection highlights reflectivity differences between the visible channel and the ice channel, 1.6 microns. Upper level info uses the upper water vapor channel, 6.19 microns, a channel that usually senses information from only the top of the atmosphere, and the window channel. The difference highlights upper level features. Finally, vegetation plays on the differences in reflectance in the visible and in the near-infrared 0.86 micron veggie channel. Let's look at a couple of these channel differences. This toggle, data are from early June 2016 from Himawari 8, shows the visible imagery, 0.64 microns, the veggie band, 0.86 microns, and the difference field. Dark shading in the difference field shows where 0.86 is more reflective than 0.64, over vegetation chiefly, and light shading shows where 0.64 is more reflective than 0.86. The difference field can distinguish between actively growing vegetation over southern China, for example, and less productive lands over northwest China. ABI channels at 0.64 and 1.61 microns detect reflectance at those wavelengths, and that reflectance is strongly influenced by ice, because ice absorbs energy at 1.61 microns. There are regions in this image of low clouds over snow. These low clouds are composed of water droplets. Because the water clouds comprise water droplets, they are highly reflective in both visible and ice channel imagery. There are also regions of snow. These are white in the visible, but considerably darker in the 1.61. Regions of snow appear as white in the difference field, over China and Hokkaido, for example. Clouds made up of water droplets appear dark. The upper-level info difference field requires the subtraction of 11.2 micron information from 6.19 micron. The Satellite Foundation course for GOES-R on the 3 water vapor channels has taught you that upper-level water vapor, the 6.19 microns, sees mostly features above 500 millibars. The difference field highlights high clouds in the atmosphere. The ImageSat shows the difference field where the largest differences have been screened out of the image. This version of the upper-level channel difference gives a good approximation of the cirrus channel, that is band 4, 1.4 microns on ABI. The 16 bands on ABI offer unprecedented geostationary observing capabilities. Each individual band can be used to observe phenomena, and band combinations or differences can highlight features or levels in the atmosphere. Furthermore, RGB imagery can further bring out information that is present in component bands. A good practice when interpreting difference fields, or RGBs, is to have the component pieces at hand. Fields in one can be better interpreted if you have the ability to interrogate fields in the originals. Here are some additional internet resources to browse. This includes quantitative products that are available. They nicely complement channel differences or RGB products that are more qualitative. This concludes the Satellite Foundation course for GOES-R on multi-channel interpretation. Thanks for listening.